Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 7. Today, we will at last have the first proper freight service enter the main line. Instead of just allowing some deliveries to use it, we will instead set up several separate, but still interconnected lines, which will pool resources at one freight hub, move them to another one, so they can be distributed at that location. This will be more of a test run than anything, so we will only deal with a single production chain. In fact, we will just use one of the simplest ones, namely the food production. And since we had no food factories at the target station, I decided to make use of one of our mods, and build one. Before we do anything, I would like to sort out that heritage line we built the last time. First, I asked what to name the train itself, and the originator of the idea suggested Pegler Express, named after Alan Pegler, the person who was responsible for saving the real-life Flying Scotsman from being scrapped when it was decommissioned by British Railways. The Preservation Society couldn't raise the money, so Pegler stepped in, and he is the reason why this iconic steam locomotive is still alive and kicking. Couldn't have asked for a better name, so thank you for the suggestion. It was also brought to my attention that the real-life train usually has BR1 coaches attached to it when out on the tracks, so of course we went with those. I don't really know what the usual color of these coaches is, but I knew that when the ashes of Alan Pegler were taken for one last ride to York, so his ashes could be scattered by the train's firebox as it ascended Stoke Bank, those cars were dark red colored, so I just went with that. I also restored the locomotive's colors to the default green and black. I really shouldn't have changed it, it's a heritage line, let's keep things as they are. I also made the mistake of building electrified rails with concrete sleepers. I think it would make more sense to have regular wooden ones instead, so it fits the nature of the line better. And I also downgraded the line to a single track setup. If we ever decide to use more than one train on this service, then we can just add passing tracks, instead of double tracking it. I feel it's more fitting. I have no idea how I didn't notice that I missed a track piece in the station. Only saw it in the editor. Let's hope I remember to fix that at some point. And messing with the tracks did also mess with the platform assignments, so let's sort that out real quick. Good thing the game automatically decided to use the platform that has all 3 rail segments built, so we should be just fine. As I was trying to replace the depot connection, I thought, do we really need that depot? At first I liked the idea of having it there, but now, I'm not so sure. Since this line meant to deliver passengers from Paddington to the main line, I just named it as such, Mainline Paddington, so we know that it's a side branch of that service. Also, I forgot to turn off catenaries while downgrading the tracks. Let's go over that one more time. Now that's more like it. Can't wait to start decorating. I would love to have this iconic train ride past some farm fields and forests, instead of this big empty field. Next, I said in the last episode that I wasn't satisfied with how this road bridge turned out. To me, it doesn't look right, with it being so high above the tracks. How about we route the road above the tunnel entrance instead, and only bridge over that freight off-ramp? For the best possible results, we should place the bridge over the off-ramp first, and then build out the rest of the road. Usually, the bridge marker is in the middle of the bridge, so if it's right over the infrastructure below, then it should be pretty well centered. This model doesn't seem to clip through the power cables, so we can use it, but maybe not the green version. Well, I forgot to set this end of the bridge to be an embankment instead. Give me a second, I'll notice it. I might have been able to do it without rebuilding the whole thing, but it can be a little finicky, so I just did it from scratch. Maybe the span is a bit too narrow. I might change it to be more wide later, but it will do for now. I do like it a lot more now though, looks more natural I think. Well, time to move on to the main focus of the video, namely the first proper freight service going through the main line. This station will serve all the local industries, as well as 3 separate towns, namely Greenwich, Kilburn, and Paddington, so we should increase the capacity by adding more station buildings. I'm still not at the point where I want to get the capacity increasing mod. Speaking of those cities by the way, I think Paddington and Kilburn should swap names. Given that Paddington has one of the main train stations of London, I think it would make more sense to have that as the mainline stop, instead of Kilburn. Not sure I will change it, but I'm tempted. Speaking of Paddington, I talked about Alan Pegler at the start of the episode. As it happens, when operating and maintaining the Flying Scotsman ended up bankrupting him, he got an apartment overlooking Paddington Station, so I love the idea of our version of the train having a stop there. He really was a railroad enthusiast through and through. Anyways, with that road freight station done, we have access to the 2 cities on that side, but we still need a connection to Greenwich. I'll do that a bit later. But we need a suitable industry to deliver stuff to. I only took a quick glance, but couldn't really spot any immediately obvious industrial pairings we could exploit, so I decided to just build one of our own. There are a lot of farms around the other freight station we could pull crops from, so it made sense to build a food factory here, especially since all 3 towns were ready to receive food shipments. The place looks pretty flat, so we won't need to worry about any bridges or tunnels along the way. Well, not all the way. I would like to use trains all along this production chain, so I built it relatively far away from the freight station, so we have an excuse. If it was closer, it would be more economical to just use trucks. Now, getting across all these tracks was a bit tricky. They were going up from the station, so I just went with a tunnel. Word of caution, whenever the game gives you this gray gravel-like texture when placing things, that means you are below sea level. Messing with the terrain too much at this point could cause some minor graphical glitches, but nothing major. There, did you see it? There was a small piece of water poking through the ground textures. Usually, you can just mess with the smoothing to get rid of it, but it can happen. Anyways, time for another road overpass, so we don't need to worry about a level crossing. Yeah, this will do. All these bridges and tunnels look really out of place now, but once they are surrounded by trees and other decorations, they will blend in much better. Anyways, time to set up the line. This one will take grain from the freight station, and take it to the factory, and then the finished bread will be taken straight back for local distribution. Also, as you might have noticed, I simply cannot get a grip on a unified naming scheme for the lines. I tried to use 4-letter codes for the cities, but I seem to have given up on that. I think I saw Kernel Failure, a pretty big TF2 YouTuber, use that kind of naming, so I thought I'd give it a try, but not sure I'm a fan. So, we have the end product delivery set up. Let's do the same for the raw materials, namely the grain from the farms. We have 2 of them lined up pretty neatly, so we can take advantage of this happy little accident, and use a single line to stop it both. The thing is, these farms will only ever produce 200 crops in one production cycle, and we are pretty close to the freight station, so we can safely combine them, and a single train will be more than capable of handling the load. Once again, trying to build a bridge would be kind of hard, so tunneling under the main line would make more sense. I might go ahead and just turn the main line itself into an overpass, but a tunnel will be adequate for this very moment. "120 km/h speed should be perfectly acceptable for this turn. Yeah, this will absolutely need to be turned into an underpass. The main line only has bridges when going over water anyway, so might be a nice change of scenery to have some here too. Instead of building a separate train depot, we could just hook this line up to the mainline tracks, so we can keep using that monster depot we built. The thing to keep in mind is that the way I did it, any train we add will need to make a full lap around the entire mainline ring. Small price to pay in my book. Plus, it will let the train driver take one last look at the wider world, before being confined to running the same short line for all eternity. And as an added bonus, we can use that slip switch as the lane changer for the actual mainline service we are about to add into the mix. Some of you have been asking for electric locomotives, so how about we use the Class 92 for this one? I did test this setup before the recording, so I am fairly sure 12 cars will be more than enough to handle the job. We should also add the same kind of mainline connection to the other side too. We will need it for both the branch service train, and for the actual mainline train. Speaking of, let's set that line up now. I didn't really check the platform assignments yet, but in the next episode, we definitely need to move this line's platform number in the Harrow Freight Station, since right now, it's sharing it with the grain deliveries, so only one of them can be in the station at any given time. And by the way, this is not the final setup for the mainline freight services. When we add more stations into the mix, we will have the same clockwise and anti-clockwise lines we had with the passenger services, but since we only have 2 of them at this point, it will be a back and forth kind of setup. Also, since we only have grains being delivered at the moment, all the cars on that train will be gondola cars, but as more and more goods are being added, we will need to start diversifying. Okay. We have 2 trains making their way around the ring to reach their assigned lines. Time to add the third one. The previous 2 will only move grains, at least for now, but the third one will also need to move bread, which cannot be loaded into hopper cars, so the best option is to use containers instead. Alright, it will take a while for these guys to find their way around the network. Let's see if we can find something to do while that's going on. How about we add our last town, Sudbury, into the mix? It will be a very similar setup we had with the Heritage Line, only a bit more modern. Yep, 120 meters is the length of these platforms, so let's build the same on both ends. I think we need to go over that road somehow. Time for a super narrow angle overpass. The embankment is a bit steep, but not egregiously so. We also need to go over the existing rail lines here. While I could theoretically justify building a level crossing when it comes to roads, I really cannot do it for rail tracks. Alright, no more obstructions, let's do this in one go. I don't mind this tunnel, but maybe we should have it start a little closer to the hill, so it doesn't run underground for so long, with barely any dirt on top of it. Let's try leveling the ground again, we can do this better than that. Once again, this will be a single track service, and we just add a passing lane if we decide to increase the frequency. By the way, I prefer to smooth things while looking straight down. On certain slope angles, grass will start appearing on the ground, while still having a dirt texture. I would prefer to have it be green, so it looks better from afar. Choosing a train for this particular line was a bit of a stab in the dark for me. I knew I wanted something a bit more modern. And instead of building the set myself, I decided to go with a pre-built train. I definitely didn't want to use the underground tube set. I want to reserve those for the time when we have colossal cities, and we can use them for local services. Same goes for the DLR, that is definitely meant for internal passenger routes. I also wanted to avoid using anything that wouldn't fit for such a service, like a bullet train, or anything remotely high speed. And I also wanted to stay as close to the 120 meters length we set for ourselves. I think this class 377 is what we will go for. Yeah, let's just go with this. Although I could have sworn I got a train set with some color schemes that matches the London Overground service, with those lovely orange and blue colors, so I might need to replace this at one point with that. Anyways, since we have a train service for this place now, we should also give it a bus line too, so we can ensure that everyone can reach the outside world. Yeah, it's a small place, so 3 stops will be more than enough for now. Let's go with RATP for this one. As for the line name, anyone familiar with Sudbury will not be surprised for my choice of number 18. It goes for 14 kilometers from Sudbury to Euston. It was also the only bus line that was always nearby every time I moved house in the city. It was also always extremely busy, and I can count myself extremely lucky in this regard. The only time I had to use it on a regular basis was when I was living in Sudbury, which was one of the end points on the route. There was always a seat open for me, since I got on at the first stop. If I had to stand shoulder to shoulder with dozens of other passengers at the lower level for several kilometers, I would have gone insane. Well, we might as well leave this guy to do its job. It will take a bit of time for the local people to notice that they can use the buses and trains now, instead of messing around with those stupid cars of theirs. Since we had some time to kill, I decided to try to do something that I wanted to try for a while now, and since we needed to set up the freight routing through the mainline stations, it was the perfect excuse. Basically, to make this routing work, we need to place signals in neat lines at the station entrance, and since they were situated this way, we could place some decorative gantries to hold those lights for us. They would be hanging from the top, instead of being put on a simple pole, like we've been doing until now. Also, instead of simply building an X crossing at the station, I wanted to separate the 2 arms into distinct lane switches. Sadly, I was pretty unfamiliar with how this works at this point, so I didn't leave enough room for everything. So this experiment will end up being a failure, but hey, at least you'll see what I've been babbling about. These are the gantries. They have these little service platforms on top, and that's where the lights go. As usual with complex mods, it's a bit convoluted to work with, but you get the idea. Alright, we have 4 empty spaces for the signals. And I didn't leave enough room to place them properly. The rail switch was blocking the placement on this side. Next, I tried to place the signals first, And build the gantry after that. See how the gantry and the signal fit together? That's the general idea of this mod. Well, that doesn't look quite right, does it? What if we try to build two separate double-lane ones, instead of trying to span all 4 tracks with a single gantry? Now it didn't want to snap to this signal. I give up. But hey, you get the idea, right? When it comes to decorating, and I speed up the footage even more, then I will not be so shy about messing with this, just to make it look nice. For now, we can stick to the normal signals. Also, since we added more of them, we need to be a bit more careful with how we use them for waypoints. If the trains don't want to cooperate, we might need to use 2 of them between the stations to work correctly. Like in this instance. Since we have a way for the train to enter the correct lane later than normal, we need to build out the same setup, so we can use a signal here to force it down the correct path. That's better, now it uses the inner lane again. And since the setup is more complex than it was before, we need to add 2 more signals to make sure we have enough blocks to go around. And look, it's the train that's supposed to deliver the grain and the food at the end of the industry chain we set up earlier. I have absolutely no idea how it managed to end up in this direction. Oh well, it's going the right way now, so it will end up where it's supposed to. Yeah, it's going on the inner tracks, but it's not where it will normally operate, so I don't mind it using the wrong lane. This is a one-time thing. At least the green line seemed to be doing the right thing. Okay, it's about to leave the main line, and enter its final area of operation. Before we end the episode, I did want to set up the actual food deliveries to the local towns. We have a connection to Paddington, but not to Greenwich. Let's fix that now. Okay, we have a clean way to the town from the station. Time to set up the actual distribution lines. Paddington has been requesting food from the very beginning, so there are a lot of buildings demanding the stuff. That will be very beneficial for the food factory. And it seems the truck stop in Greenwich is pretty much at the perfect place already. That was a lucky coincidence. Since we have the trains running already, we only need to add the trucks to these lines, and the supply chain will be completed. Up to this point, we were only delivering enough grain to the food factory to satisfy the production capacity for level 1. But now that the final products are also being delivered, this should allow the factory to upgrade, requesting more grain from the farms from the other end. If I remember correctly, one level on the food factory can use the entire production capacity of one farm, so with it being upgraded to level 2, we will be able to utilize the output of both farms we have connected. And we already have some bread waiting in the station. Things are looking up for us. As usual, the real indicator of stuff working as intended is the presence of goods in the stations. The industries will only start moving their products into our stations if we can actually move them with what we have. So having bread in the station means they will end up where they are needed eventually. I think we can call this experiment a success. As I've said before, we are only moving grains down the main line at the moment, so you might be asking, why not just use a single line to do all this? Well, things will get a bit more complicated as we add more goods into the mix. At that point, we will need to get rid of a lot of the gondolas from the mainline train, and replace it with other cargo types. And we will also need to increase the frequency of them, because if we decrease the capacity of one kind of product on the main line, we will need to make the number of deliveries higher to compensate. But with a single good, that's not a concern right now. Anyways, thank you for watching. If you liked the video, then leaving a like and subscribing to the channel just might motivate me to make more. If you are more in the donating mood, you can find a link to my Ko-fi page in the description, where you can buy me a glass of water. I don't really drink coffee. Thank you for your support, and until next time, I will see you later.